and welcome to CIO Leadership Live New Zealand. I'm your host, Kathy O'Sullivan, editor for CIO New Zealand. And my guest today is Angela Nash, Chief Information and Technology Officer at New Zealand Rugby. Ange, lovely to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you.
Looking forward to our chat. I guess to start us off, can you tell us a little bit more about your role and what your team at New Zealand Rugby does?
Sure. I mean, we have quite a broad remit, just given the nature of the business. So not only do I look after sort of what we call run the bus, so the IT operations of NZ Rugby, but we also have some key technology platforms. So obviously we have run IT operations. We have high performance and professional technology platforms, and they range from the GPS trackers in the back of the jersey through to analytics over the broadcast feed, through to delivering live information into the coach's box. And then we have community rugby. So that's the sort of the management of the regional game. And obviously rugby is one of New Zealand's national games. And so that's sort of every regional player from 5-year-old rippers right up to senior grades, and so that's obviously quite a big piece of work as well. And then we have digital platforms, and so that's things like our websites, some of our engagement apps, really looking at the sort of fan experience. And then we have sort of innovation as well, and so that's looking at new technologies, and that's probably becoming more prevalent and more important for us as we move into the sort of next phase of our digital transformation, is to really look at, now we've kind of shored up what we do all day and, got things running well, what's that next level of engagement for our fans? So, yeah, it's quite a broad remit, but it's super interesting and very exciting stuff, yeah.
Yeah, and certainly something Kiwis are very passionate about.
Yes.
Which I'm sure makes it even more interesting. So quite a broad range there that you look after. Mm-hmm. And you've touched on transformation. It is a buzzword. It's something that's thrown around a lot by leaders, whether they're CEOs or CIOs. Can you tell us how has the approach taken shape in your own career? Transformation, it's a word, it seems like quite easy to do, but in reality, it's hard yakka. So how has it taken shape in your own career?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing because some companies, I think, have transformed without realizing that's what they were doing. And certainly I've worked in places where you start the year one way and you finish it the other, and you haven't really realised that was a transformative approach or a transformative project because you didn't think of it like that. I think if I was to translate it specifically to my current role, we went in with a very targeted, strategic focus on making sure that we kind of cleaned up some historical, organic growth over time, things sort of, a bit of silo pockets of activity, things going on, and really put a lot of energy and effort into pulling our current state into a consolidated view, understanding what our key technology pillars were, who our customers were, who our business owners were. I don't think we'd ever really thought of technology in that way. It had always been much like other companies, it was always a sort of a large cost center, or it was, a necessary evil to help you deliver to other things. And actually, particularly in professional sport, technology is such an enabler now, and it's drastically changed over the last decade. And so we put a real lot of energy into true digital transformation. And so I think it's safe to say the sort of last 2 or 3 years has been a real exercise in getting ourselves into a position where we can really focus on building new technologies going forward, which again, I think's a little mix of a whole bunch of experiences from previous companies about what you should do, what you shouldn't do, some things that have worked, some things that haven't, and just really trying to pull all that together into making a plan that's fit for purpose for us, because there is no prescriptive method for digital transformation. It's a bit like project management. There's lots of ways that you can do it, but very few places can prescribe to them 100%. And so, I think that's probably one of the biggest things I've seen is that, there's just no one way that works for everybody, and you have to be really conscious about that. Yeah.
And there might be not one way that it is for everyone, but are there any key steps, do you think, to take along the way, or is there a starting point to kick off a transformation journey?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that gets largely overlooked or not thought about until way too late in the process is people and comms about why are we doing this? What's the benefit to you as an individual? What are your thoughts and insights on what we should shouldn't do, and really actually start with your people, because if your people aren't on board, you're going to fail. And you can't bring them in at the 11th hour and go, oh, by the way, we've been off in isolation and creating this big digital strategy that's going to transform our business, but we haven't bothered to talk to you about it, So I think for me, and again, I think that's a lesson learned from previous projects, is to really get people on board. And if they, and you need to almost explain and integrate what you're trying to do with people. And it varies depending upon what part of the business you're speaking to, and really make sure you've nailed that. I think the next step is you can't transform if you don't know what your current state is. I think, you could sort of go, oh, we want to have this and we want to be that. And, I've seen this really cool thing and we should have that. But actually, you need to sort of understand what your current state is and what's the purpose of the change. If you can't articulate why you're doing something, who's going to benefit, and what the outcomes that the business wants at a strategic level, and then tie that back to the purpose of the business, you probably shouldn't be doing it. So I think for me, those are the key steps that I always try and do. And it's certainly one of the things that we did here.
And are there any kind of common, blockers or challenges that you've encountered in transformation, either at New Zealand Rugby or in other organizations? Often things pop up, legacy, budgets, culture. Are there any kind of common roadblocks that you can think of?
People. That's why you got to start with them. So, it's certainly just change is hard. Change is hard, and it's disruptive, and it's scary, and for all the things that it brings that are great, it's also really a difficult thing to go through. And so I think one of the common reasons that projects fail or innovation or change fails is because you just haven't got people understanding why this is important. And also on the flip side of that, understanding the risk of not doing something is equally as important. So I think that, and then business priorities. I think the last couple of years has shown us all that your entire world can get thrown up in the air, literally within a week. And all of your best laid intentions and prioritization and resourcing plans and all that can be thrown out the door at a moment's notice. And so I think, those things are probably the most common blockers. But people, again, I think, lack of interest or active disruption of change because they don't see the value or disagree with it, and sometimes you need to disagree and commit anyway. So I think, that would be what I think is probably the biggest blocker.
Yeah, absolutely. Transformation being done to people as opposed to doing it with people and bringing them on the journey. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm curious on your thoughts about whether you like to see transformation as a project with a deadline and, milestones, or do you think that transformation is just, an ongoing development within a business? And what are the upsides of either of those approaches?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think it depends what sort of business you are. I think, again, if I tie it back to my current role, we've got a lot of legacy and not just technology debt or technology legacy, but cultural legacy and things like that as well. And so I don't think ongoing transforming is the right thing for our business. I think there's a difference between transformation and continual improvement. And I think if you actually are clear about those two things, they both have value. I think transformation for us here is a significant change from here to here. Now, it's not an overnight thing. It's not a checkbox that you can go, yes, we've done it. But I definitely think it's a structured thing where you say, we're starting here, we want to get to here. And when we get to here, we have a pause and we let some things embed into the business, have a little bit of corporate patience, do continual improvements. And if there's a particular area that we feel still needs to accelerate at the pace that we were doing, that's great. But when you're doing almost wholesale enterprise change at a technology level, you cannot keep that pace up forever. And people tire of it, and then they stop believing that it's important when it becomes BAU. And so I have quite a firm view on that. I think if you work in some other sort of industries and areas where constant innovation's part of your business, I think that's fine. And it's not necessarily transformative anyway. So yeah, I think you just can't run at 1,000,000 miles an hour forever. At some point you need to stop and breathe and have a look around. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and especially, you know, in this era of burnout, being very conscious of that impact, as you say, that impact of change on people, is so important. So then switching gears a little bit, and I won't throw out lots of rugby puns, I promise, but you know, as Chief Information and Technology Officer, you know, who are you on the team? How do you collaborate and influence the organization, and your leadership team?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think you know, we're a very, very non-technical organisation, and so, you know, my previous role is CEO at Rianne's, which was a hugely technical company. Coming to here, I really had to sort of relearn how to talk to people, because, you know, having a conversation with a network engineer is one thing, but then trying to explain to professional rugby players or management why something's important it's just a completely different conversation. And so I think that was a lesson for me coming in, is that I can't talk to people like the network engineers, because you know, it's not an interesting conversation if you're not a network engineer, right? So I think you know, obviously I sit on the exec team. I think my role is, I think, twofold. Is one, to show the technology strategy and vision to the business and make sure that everyone understands what that is and where they fit into that picture, and what value my team brings to their particular area. So I think that was a really important thing. I think the articulation of our clear technology platforms and creating technology owners for each one of them was a step change in how we think about technology. It wasn't just one big bucket that kind of delivered to the business. We actually were very conscious and tactical in talking to people about, this is what sits in your area, this is what's important, and here's the person that owns it for you on your behalf, and you tell us what you need and we'll deliver to your, you know, what you need. And so that was a very clear approach that we put in place here. And the reason I did it like that was to make sure that everybody saw technology as an enabler to the business and not just a cost center, or not just a bunch of software, not a bunch of contracts that you signed and then paid for, but it actually delivered genuine business need and you understood why that was important for your team. I think the other thing I do is provide almost that strategic vision and lens to what we need to think about going forward. So if I was to pick on fan engagement, professional sports, if we were to look at, you know, any of the football clubs, NBA, NFL, you know, Tennis Australia, America's Cup, F1, you name it, some of the technology innovation around those areas is insane and amazing and so engaging. And rugby's just not there yet. And there's so much cool stuff that we can do in that area. So one of the other things is sort of, you know, keeping that eye out on the future of what we can actually do better for our fans. And then also be that expert voice around what's Web 3.0, what is the metaverse, what's crypto, what's NFTs, what's fan tokens, and, you know, really sort of driving that energy inside the business around what we think we want to do and what we definitely shouldn't do, you know, because you could do lots of things, but there's some stuff we probably shouldn't. So, you know, so as be that almost that expert voice inside the business as well.
Yeah, wonderful. I love that future focus, but also, you know, bring it back to the business and what actually is relevant. And yep. I loved your comments as well around enabling your tech team, enabling the business and working with those business units, rather than, as you say, sitting off to the side as yep. you know, just those kids in the corner, you know, whatever yeah. whatever the terms they used to use around tech teams. I know a lot of people have experienced that. Yep. So thinking about your own team then, how are you creating a culture that helps people thrive? You know, I know New Zealand Rugby, and especially at that high level, is really big on performance. I mean, does that translate into the tech team as well?
Yeah, I think so. And you know, I sort of, I have a genuine belief that as a manager and a leader, that I hire smart people and then I get out of their way, you know, and let them be smart, let them go and actually own and run and drive their part of the business. I think I see my role as, again, as an enabler, that if there's a roadblock that I can help move, I'll go move it. If there's some support that you need, I'll support you. If there's an answer that you need, I'll give it to you. But I'm not here to tell you what to do. And so I think particularly in technology, and particularly because our what my team delivers to is so diverse. I mean, you know, I have IT ops specialist, and then I have data specialists in analytics and high performance professional sports. And then I have people who really know digital platforms around, you know, web and geolocating and stuff like that. And they are all very, very different skill sets and very, very different people. And so there is no one rule for all in that scenario. And so, yeah, I genuinely believe that, I'm the team's biggest supporter. And probably, to use a rugby analogy, I'm also there to drop the shoulder and get people out of the way if we need to get something done, because sometimes it's hard to get stuff done. And we all know technology, you need to get the resource and the funding and the buy-in and the strategy and all the rest of it. So, yeah, that's how I think I bring the energy into the team, because, you can't possibly know everything about all those areas, and you let people use their expertise that you hired them for. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you're one of a few women in a chief information or CTO role or CIO role. We don't have a lot of females in these senior roles. Why do you think that is? What practical things do you think can be done, to attract, more diversity in general to the IT industry, but also what do you think can be done to encourage women to apply for CIO roles and CTO roles?
Yeah, it's such I think it's such a hard problem, but then I also think it's a really easy problem, because if all of us actually went and hired women into roles, we wouldn't have a problem. And so we actually need to walk the talk as well. So, certainly I think one of the things, there's a couple of parts to this. I think one of them is people need to see, women like me visibly out there in roles, so that you can do it. It is something that you can do. I think in schools, right up through, I think STEM is becoming less of a stigma. You don't have to be a nerd. You don't have to write code. And I think actually exposing people to the fact that you don't have to know how to write a single line of code to have a job in STEM. You just don't. And go after what interests you. But I also think that when you look at women in STEM roles, that you need to. Don't wait to be asked. So if you think that there's an interest there, don't wait for someone to tell you that it's okay for you to go after something. I think too many people kind of go, oh, I'd like to, but I don't have the skills, or I don't have the experience, or it doesn't matter. Have a go. All you need to do is find someone who's going to help you champion, or find someone who can give you advice. There's plenty of people out there who will talk your ear off about all the opportunities that are available to you if you want them. And certainly in my team, I've taken people from other areas of the business who have no technology background whatsoever, but have really good industry knowledge in a particular area, and train them up. You don't have to, I've got a technology degree, and that's all I've ever really done. And instead of learning, sort of changing what my industry is, or what my sort of core based skills are, I've changed what area I work in. So I've worked in telco, sports, consulting and stuff like that, but I've always been a technology person. But I think there's plenty of people who are in technology that do not have technology degrees. And so, let's talk about that a bit more. You don't have to be a nerd at high school to have a job in a nerdy area, So I think just being normalizing women in IT and STEM roles, I think is really what will change the dial.
Yeah, it's so true. And many of the CIOs that I speak to, they don't have a technology degree at all. They might have come from marketing, or done a degree in economics, or chemical engineering, or many random things that have helped them along the way to where they are now. So looking back on your own career then, are there any mistakes or things that you've done in your career that, reflecting on them, they've really shaped you as a leader and you've learned a lot from?
I think, just personally speaking, I think I have a very engineering way of thinking and talking, and, it can be very black and white. And that's fine when you're talking to other engineers. But when you're trying to talk to people who aren't engineers, sometimes that can be quite a confronting conversation. And so for me personally, one of the things that's been the biggest learning for me is not everyone thinks like you do. That's a good thing. Not everybody moves at the pace that you do. That's a good thing. And so diversity, genuine diversity of thought and experience and all that sort of stuff, as the people you should surround yourself with, because as a whole, you're much stronger. So I think, you know, and that's been a little bit here and a little bit there over the course of sort of the last 25 years. But I think for me, and that's probably one of the reasons why you see a lot of people in technology who aren't from technology backgrounds, is because you need that different way of thinking to sort of be successful in these roles. So I think that's probably one of the big things. And then, you know, I'm a lifelong learner. I've always done training. I've always found new and interesting sort of areas to go and look after. And I think probably for the first few years of my career, I probably chased shiny fish a little bit too much. And I think, you know, actually you need to sort of really sit back and reflect and think about what makes you happy at work, what's the stuff that genuinely engages you as a person and what fulfills you in your career, and really go after those things. But, you know, if you're already good at something, go be amazing at it. You know, don't be average at everything. Go and, you know, really find the things that float your boat and go after those. So I think those are probably, a couple of lessons that I learned on the way. Yeah,
wonderful and great advice there. Is there any other career advice that you have been given along the way that, you know, has been instrumental and really helpful for you? And what's the best piece of career advice you've ever received?
Shut up and listen.
Sure.
Ange, shut up and listen. And you know, and again, that's sort of that when you run at a million miles an hour, and many of us do, and then there's nothing wrong with that. But you miss other people's very important insights and valuable offering to a conversation if you just come in assuming you're right all the time. And so sometimes, and people aren't, you know, the whole introvert, extrovert, and, you know, whether you feel confident at a table enough to speak or you don't, or sometimes people need to go away and think about things and they'll come back the next day with an opinion, you know. So I think for me, shut up and listen. And I actually tell myself that sometimes when I'm in meetings, I was like, just shut up and listen. Like, this is important stuff. Because, again, not everyone thinks at the same pace, not everyone consumes information in the same way, but it doesn't mean that their opinion or input's not valuable. And so if you're always the loudest and the fastest and the noisiest, sometimes you need to just shut up and listen. Yeah.
I love it. It's great. And it's definitely fundamental, isn't it, to that idea of servant leadership, you know, talk less, listen more, you know, and again, who are the quiet people in the room that are not saying anything that perhaps do have a lot of value to add? Yeah, I love that. So just finally then, Ange, what's important to you in the months ahead?
Yeah, I mean, we've got so much change coming up in front of us. And like I sort of talked to earlier, you know, we've spent a couple of years really shoring our foundations up, ready to go and build some significant things. We've also got a couple of new partnerships that have just been announced. And we've obviously got some private equity conversations and things like that happening as well. And so overall, you know, those things are going to present some real opportunity in the next sort of couple of months. I think what's important about all of that for me is ensuring that our people don't get overwhelmed by those opportunities or that change, and that we still are really firm about what's our strategic goal, you know, what's our direction, and make sure that, again, we almost, you know, don't chase shiny fish. We're really clear about what we're doing and why we're doing it, and just try and create a stable course, because there's a lot going on. And of course, we've got the Women's World Cup coming up, and then we've got prep for the Men's World Cup in France next year. And there's just a volume of activity coming, particularly in my area around technology and some changes that we've got and things that we're rolling out, that I think it'd be really easy to, you know, be that duck that looks like it's swimming really easy, but its little feet are going crazy under the water. And so just really be mindful of the impact that change and that high workload and high energy has on your people. Yeah, absolutely. Well, we wish you the very best with it. I won't wish the All Blacks well against Ireland. Match is coming up soon. Sold out match. Yeah. Yes, I'll be there, but I'll be in green. Angela Nash, Chief Information and Technology Officer at New Zealand Rugby. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you. Good to chat.